I'm Erin Wilson, and you are listening to Inside NC Labor, a podcast designed to inform and educate North Carolina citizens on the role that the Department of Labor plays in state government. Good morning, everyone. I'm Erin Wilson, a Public Information Officer here at the North Carolina Department of Labor, along with my co-host, John Mallow.
My name is John Mallow. I am also a Public Information Officer here at the North Carolina Department of Labor.
And today our topic is heat stress hazards and solutions in agriculture, and our guests are Beth Rodman, who's the Bureau Chief of the Agricultural Safety and Health Bureau, Grant Quiller, who's with the Occupational Safety and Health Division, and Roberto Rosales, who is with the NCSU Cooperative Extension. Thank y'all for being here today.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So Beth, you've worked with the ASH Bureau for many years, first as an Agricultural Safety and Health Compliance Officer, and now as the Bureau Chief. Tell us a little more about your background and your work with the agricultural community.
So, as you said, I've been here for several years. I first joined DOL in 2007. Prior to that, I worked in the construction industry for a period of time, worked for a debris removal company, a grading company, oversaw crews that installed silt fence. Came here in 2007 as an agricultural safety officer, conducted pre-occupancy inspections throughout the state, compliance inspections in a variety of agricultural settings, and at that time we were doing a lot of on-farm safety and health training. So we trained farmers, farm workers, farm labor contractors on a variety of safety and health topics, including heat stress. Currently in my role as Bureau Chief, obviously I oversee the ASH Bureau's activities, but I work more now with a lot of our partner agencies, a lot of state and local government entities, and together we work on a lot of challenges faced by the agricultural community and try and find ways, creative solutions to address some of those obstacles that both farmers and farm workers are facing now.
So we're recording this podcast in the middle of summer in North Carolina, which is always hot and humid, and I hate it. What are the best strategies for growers and workers to protect themselves from common heat hazards?
That is a great question. Something that growers often ask us about, specifically when the inspectors are out doing pre-oc inspections. So first and foremost, everyone on the farm needs to be trained about heat-related injuries and illnesses. Training should cover the signs and symptoms of heat stress, prevention, and most definitely response. So what to do in the event that someone becomes ill. It's important when conducting training to avoid making any assumptions about a worker's knowledge about heat-related injuries and illnesses, and also not to assume that they are used to working in a hot and humid environment. A lot of times in conversations, people will say, oh, well, they come from Mexico, so they're used to working in hot and humid conditions, and that's not the case. Secondly, growers should implement a work schedule that allows workers to slowly adjust to working in hot temperatures. For example, farm workers that arrive in March, they are slowly acclimated to the heat, right? The temperature slowly increasing little by little as we progress towards the summer months. The other side of that is workers that arrive in July. Like right now, we probably have a good amount of workers that have recently arrived or who are arriving. So they're going to be working in 90 plus temperatures, high heat index, and they need to have time to slowly adjust to working in these conditions. Oftentimes when we receive reports of heat-related injuries or fatalities, it occurs with workers who had just arrived in the middle of the summer when they're already, the temperature's already hot and humid. Next, obviously, they need to provide plenty of cool drinking water, shaded areas to take breaks, and not only do they need to provide the cool drinking water, but they really need to encourage workers to drink water. We tell them to monitor the water coolers. So how often are you refilling the coolers throughout the day? It's recommended that workers drink 8 ounces of water every 15 to 20 minutes just to stay hydrated. So we tell farmers or farm supervisors, monitor how often you're refilling, check the coolers, do the math. It's, an equation to figure out, are they drinking enough to stay hydrated? Also, we want the farmers to encourage their workers to wear breathable, light-colored clothing. They can reduce the rate of work, so we don't want them working at such a heavy pace in the hotter temps. alter work schedules. Some growers will have the workers come in really early in the morning, work to about 11:30 or so, take a long 3 to 4 hour break during the hottest part of the day, and then come back later and work into the evening hours. We all know it stays a lot later at night, so they can work a little bit later. So we also encourage growers to provide air conditioning. It's not a requirement to provide air conditioning in farm worker housing, but we encourage them to do so that a worker can come home after working all day in the direct sun and completely cool down. It helps their body recover, allows them to get a good night's sleep, and so their immune system's going to be working better as well. So those are some of the recommendations that we give to farmers.
So our website includes a sample agricultural heat stress prevention program. Tell our listeners a little more about this program and any other helpful resources for growers and workers.
So our example program online is an excellent tool that can assist growers in developing a heat stress prevention program and help them implement some of the items that I just discussed, some of the strategies to prevent heat-related illness. It's fill in the blank, completely customizable, so we've done a lot of the legwork for them, but they need to customize it to how their farm operates. We also have some other bilingual training tools such as heat stress quick cards that are in English and Spanish, and a heat stress video that's on our website. A lot of growers will utilize the video to assist with the training. There's an obvious language barrier, so these tools are really helpful. And we also encourage farmers and farm workers to download the NIOSH OSHA Heat Safety Tool, which is an app that you can get right on your phone. It's in English and Spanish, and it allows the user to put their location in, tells them what the weather feels like that day, right? So we've got the temperature, humidity, and we have the heat index. It tells you how it's going to actually feel that day. I think right now in Raleigh, if I were to look at my phone right now, it's probably about 72% humidity or so it's going to be feeling closer to like 91. So it's a helpful tool because it's not just, the temperature is 80 degrees today. If you have 50% humidity, it's going to feel a lot hotter. Also on that app, it talks about the different signs and symptoms, heat stroke, and all the different stages of heat stress. So you can easily click through the app, see what the signs and symptoms are, if they are assessing somebody that's not feeling well, and then it provides information about first aid procedures. And I want to say one other thing that I forgot about that's an important tool for growers is to prevent heat on the farm is implementing a buddy system. Works really well. So basically the buddy system is you either pair workers up or you allow them to pick their partners, and they're going to look out for each other throughout the day. Sometimes if somebody is suffering from heat stress, they might be confused, they might not be able to recognize that they're not feeling well. So it's important for them to look out for each other, remind each other to drink water, say, hey, it's time to take a break, so that they can, respond if somebody is feeling ill.
That's very useful information to have. Thanks for talking to us. Grant, we have Mr. Quiller, Grant Quiller. You are with the OSH division. Please tell us a little bit about your background in safety and health and your career here at the Department of Labor.
Yeah, so I'm what they would call a classically trained industrial hygienist. So originally, when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I was participating in some indoor air quality research in Central America, actually. And while I was doing that, that really got me introduced into the field of industrial hygiene, so I decided to continue down that path. Ended up going to get my master's, and while I was getting my master's, I was able to actually work directly with farm workers, looking at tree fruit harvesters and this specific topic of heat stress and strain for individuals out there working hard. After all that was completed, decided I wanted to be a compliance officer, started looking around, and I ended up here in North Carolina, going on 5 years now, and it's been a great journey. And I'm really passionate, especially about this topic, and also trying to help farm workers and those employees, because absolutely everybody has a right to a safe and healthy work environment, and oftentimes some of these groups, marginalized people, are forgotten about. So it's important that they know are educated about the signs and symptoms of heat stress, working along with a buddy, and can respond appropriately if an event were to occur.
I understand you wrote your graduate thesis on the impacts of heat stress on the body. Can you tell us a little bit more about your research and your findings?
Yeah, so the original scope was kind of looking at climate change. We're continuing to get hotter and hotter. Summers are getting hotter. Actually, the last 18 of the last 19 summers were some of the hottest ever recorded. And looking at that and how that's going to affect workers out there in the field. Obviously, with continued increase in temperatures, our bodies can only acclimatize so much. So what other things can we be doing to impact that and mitigate some of these risks, especially for the people out there, the farm workers? So my research, we actually looked at internal metabolic function, because a lot of times you think about heat and you might just be thinking about the external temperature and the humidity. But once you add another layer onto that, the metabolic internal combustion that you're producing while you're out there working hard, it's going to contribute a lot. So you fall into different kind of type of categories that will classify and put you at increased risk. For example, my research was looking at tree fruit harvesters. They're climbing up and down ladders, moving heavy ladders, carrying around 50, 60, 70-pound bags. And so them doing that throughout the entire day is going to contribute a lot, and it's going to change that risk profile pretty significantly. So we actually took some great measurements, and we were able to use some science that was developed by NASA, and there's this little pill that you can take, and it would track the internal temperature of people feeding Bluetooth information through. So we could actually quantify the physiological strain from their bodies working hard and also the external environment. So yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm glad I get to share some of this knowledge with you guys today. So.
And how do you apply what you've learned through your work here with the Occupational Safety and Health Division?
Yeah, so North Carolina, we have a great state OSHA program, but one of the things that is constant, and anybody living here in North Carolina knows that it's hot and humid, and you better be ready for it. So, I mean, you think of classic heat stroke, and that might be an older individual, wasn't drinking enough water. But then you kind of change that risk classification, and then you start looking at, it could be young individuals, 30-year-olds, 25-year-olds out there working. They may not fully recognize the signs and symptoms, and by the time it fully progresses to heat exhaustion or heat stroke, it can be too late for something to happen, and especially if they don't have the resources available to immediately cool the body temperature down, because our primary means of dissipating heat into the environment is through sweating. So once our body's trying to, with their vasodilation, so the blood vessels getting bigger, saying, hey, we need to get this blood out of here, away from our body, so we can dissipate that heat into the environment. But once we get to a certain temperature, 104, 105 degrees, it's going to say, hey, you're not doing a good job of regulating your internal body temperature, and it's going to shut down. And by that point, your body temperature is going to continue to increase. So even on some of these heat fatalities, which are terrible, tragic events and completely preventable, hours later, you're going to see their body temperature still in the upper hundreds, which is wild. So that's how I like to use this knowledge and share this knowledge, and hopefully being able to speak a little bit of Spanish to help do these important trainings that these farm workers aren't always getting all the time. So
Beth or Grant, either one of you can answer this. How often do you see heat-related illness happening among workers in North Carolina?
We definitely receive a few reports every year. I don't have specific stats, but I would say it's probably increasing with the temperatures increasing.
yes, and there's been a lot of recent attention to it, especially at the national level, that's focusing on it, and through that, with increased awareness, you get more media coverage on it, and so we get a lot of complaints. Our complaint desk is very busy, and we get a number. And I mean, I think you just being in an office setting, people fight over what temperature they're going to set it on, so you can imagine how that plays out in warehouses, foundries, farm settings, all different types of settings. So.
And I will say, it's July. I mentioned this before about newly arriving workers, and this is the time of year where we start to see, or I expect to see, reports coming in. I don't want to see those reports, but because I know there's workers that are arriving, and they're oftentimes not given the opportunity to acclimate before they start working in the fields. So I expect that we will see a few this year.
Yeah, Beth talked about acclimatization, how important it is, and unfortunately, actually 3 of the 4 fatalities that we see associated with a heat-related event are going to happen in that first week most often. So people not gradually ramping up how hard they're working or coming from different environments. You can imagine if you're from upstate New York or coming from some type of different environment, you're not going to be ready to just jump out and start going to work and trying to keep up. Another problem that's associated with that too is oftentimes farm workers are going to be paid piece rate, so it actually incentivizes them to get out there and work harder. So they're putting food on the table, providing for their families, they're going to be working as hard as they possibly can, and yet it might be part of the issue that's putting them at an increased risk to a heat-related event.
That's a great point, Grant.
We have Roberto Rosales. You are with the North Carolina State University Cooperative Extension. Tell us about that program and the relationship and how NCDOL fits into
Yeah,
there.
so I work with the Farm Worker Health and Safety Program at Extension, and for anybody who doesn't know Extension, we have an office in every county of the state, but our program, it's a smaller program, and so we're primarily focused in the denser part of the farm worker community in North Carolina, but we're working on expanding that, and the relationship with NCDOL, I think it's been there since the program started in 2014, and I think it's one of the few programs in the nation that actually goes out there and provides this types of training to the grower, to the contractors, to ensure that workers are following and doing their part, and being informed and mitigating some of those risk factors. And I think you can put rules and stuff in place, but I think there's also a component to there to inform the people so that they can also implement that in their daily work. So I think from our program and everything that Beth and her team put out, I think it's helpful to us help communicate that to the workers as well as the employers. So I think it's when you're talking about labor, the biggest issue here in North Carolina is the language barrier. So growers typically are English speaking, so being able to communicate that in an effective way is the main challenge. So I think us coming on, our team is bilingual, so we're able to relate, connect with the workers, and we're primarily focused more on a hands-on approach. So I think we do hands-on activities and engaging workers, and I think part of the plan that Beth had mentioned earlier, a lot of that is what it states, having a question, making sure workers are able to understand what's the farm's plan, or what's the prevention plan for the farm. And so sometimes I feel like there's not that connection there. So us being able to come on there and have that dialogue and conversation, I think it builds that culture, to understand all of these key concepts on how to mitigate those risk factors.
Yeah, I agree. Communication is very, very key. So, because if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to help yourself?
Or even, I think it might sound basic, right? But I think when we're able to break it down into a way that we understand, I think that's where we come in to break that information down to this is how you reduce exposure, because the heat we can't get rid of, right? So we got to do our part to prepare and prevent.
So can you tell us about your role as a farm worker health and safety educator?
Main thing is just being there to help bridge that communication within the ag community. So I started with the extension in 2018 as an educator, and now I'm the program coordinator. But what I've seen kind of the program evolving into is just kind of helping growers have the resources that they need, connecting them to resources that Beth and her team and other state resources that are available, and then also helping workers have those resources that they need both on and off the farm. So we play a big role in connecting a lot of these different groups that typically wouldn't work or don't know these resources. And so training is one of our bigger components, but we take more of a holistic approach and just kind of try to make those connections, because from extension standpoint, we want to improve the lives of North Carolina residents. So that doesn't matter where you're from, or if you live here and you're in the community. I think it's important for us to be be able to be that connector there. Yeah, heat stress is one of our components, but as a training as a whole, we help the farm, meet compliance and other important training topics. So, Worker Protection Center, which is a national standard around pesticide safety, we that's a huge one in helping workers, reduce that exposure, even if they're not applying, avoiding that, reducing that residue exposure. So that's a big component. And then we also cover, since we have a lot of tobacco, we do a green tobacco illness. So making sure workers, and I think Beth mentioned it earlier, that workers are coming from different parts of Mexico, at least from the H2A program. So they don't grow tobacco in all of Mexico. I think there's a small area of Mexico that does. But even then, informing them as they're coming over, if they haven't worked here, what green tobacco illness is. Just, and especially with COVID that happened, it was really important to inform people as they were traveling here from other states or from Mexico, what North Carolina was doing. So I think we played a big part in providing some of this education, as they were arriving, to make sure that they were protecting themselves. And so I think, the whole idea of offering these trainings, yes, it's requirement or regulation that the farm needs to meet, but more than that, I think it's more about building that culture on the farm, and us coming or having somebody in person come onto the farm, I think helps that culture continue to evolve, to where new people coming onto that farm see what the older groups are doing, implementing the buddy system. All of those things help in reducing some of the risk factors, not just heat stress, but everything else that they're exposed to on the farm.
So what does these training programs cost?
So it's free.
Well,
So-
free is good. People like free.
Yeah, so basically, and that's why we're trying to expand. We have a large workforce here in North Carolina. We're a small program, but that's kind of what we want to build up to be able to offer this training to across the state. But essentially, call your local cooperative extension, and then they'll connect you with somebody who's nearby to set up that training. So, main thing we need to know is location, when's the best time during work hours, and then how many workers we'll have. And we try to keep it at a smaller group, 50 or less. Just because that'll retain that information, make sure that they're engaged. If we need to, add more, or we'll bring up our rest of our team or another educator and do more trainings. But it really is trying to be flexible, and so I think that's kind of what the best thing about this program, the flexibility, and offering that.
Right, so this question is for everybody. If you want to add in your thoughts, what would you think is the most important message to get across to the agricultural community regarding heat stress prevention?
I think one of the important messages, because there are so many, there's so much takeaway and so much to learn and know about heat, but I think it's important that growers and employers in general understand that you can significantly reduce the risk of heat-related injury and illness if you have an effective program that you implement in the workplace, right? Sometimes we have employers, they have a great program on paper, but implementing it didn't actually happen, right? So we want to make sure you develop this program, you implement it so that you can provide a safe and healthy workplace for your workers.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I think that's part of what I've been mentioning about, creating that culture on the farm. So if you're able to set it into your workers that this is what you want, and year after year, the importance of it, it just kind of makes it easier to implement that plan.
And I think it's important to remember that to reduce these risks, these are very, very preventable events from happening if you can implement the program and have people have the tools and powers that they need. It's a very complex topic we're talking about today, but we try and present simple solutions that you can have out there. Water, rest, shade, working with partners out there, a buddy system, talking to each other, keeping in check with each other throughout the day, because once you hit the point where you're at heat exhaustion, you might not be able to recognize it anymore. even though you've been trained on it. So having that buddy in place to be, hey, we need to get this person home, get them into a cool environment, and then remember to follow up with that person, because you can't just leave that person while you go back out into the field. If their body temperature continues to rise, they could still, it's unfortunately happened a number of times where somebody ends up dying after they've been left alone on the front doorstep. So understanding all that, implementing it, and obviously none of these growers want this to happen, none of these farm workers want this to happen, and we definitely do not want this to happen. So how can we work together to try and raise awareness on this issue?
And communication, I want to just say, like, they both mentioned it, but communicating with your workers feeling comfortable to communicate with supervisors and farm owners, it's so crucial to understanding what is actually happening day to day versus what you may want to be happening or what you think is happening. So if you have levels of supervisors in place, check in with your workers, see if your programs are being implemented in a way that you want them to be implemented, or that they are being implemented every day in the field.
So this question is for any of y'all as well. Agriculture is the #1 industry in North Carolina. So how do we find the right balance between protecting our agricultural workers, yet also ensuring a thriving agricultural economy?
I think Roberto kind of touched on this briefly before, and this is something that I know in my meetings with partners across the state is taking a holistic approach. When we say the agricultural community, that's what we all mean by the agricultural community. It's every part of it. It's the farmers, it's the farm workers, it's the farm families. Everybody needs to be safe and healthy at work. We need farms because we all need to eat, first and foremost. And farmers need workers. And workers need to be able to come here. They want to provide a living wage. They want to have a living wage so they can provide for their families. So just understanding the whole system in place. So I think working together to find solutions that work, solutions that keep workers safe, that can be implemented, that are feasible to implement.
Yeah, I think investing in your labor force is key. I think if you have healthy workers, then you'll see your production profits increase too. But more than anything, just investing in your workers and making sure you create a healthy and safe working environment, I think just creates an overall win-win situation for everyone.
All right, we definitely appreciate you guys joining us today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and I think it was very informative, very interesting. Any final thoughts, any final comments you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, information is power, and the more you can share this information, download that HEAT app. It's a very useful tool. It has a lot of great information on it. Water, rest, shade, and buddy system.
And if you have questions, if you have questions about how you can develop a program, or if you want ideas for implementation, or you need to get in touch with Roberto's group for training, or if there's other training opportunities, please reach out to us. You can call the Agricultural Safety and Health Bureau directly. We'll either send somebody out to look at what you have in place and offer some solutions, or we'll put you in touch with somebody that can help if we cannot.
Could you name that, or give the name of that app again for our viewers, for our listeners?
So if you just Google NIOSH, NIOSH, OSHA Heat Safety Tool app, it'll come right up. It's free to download. They have it for both Apple and Android devices. It's an excellent tool.
All right. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you all for being here today with us on this podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having
guys.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all. And remember, your safety is our priority.